Last night was rough in MLB DFS with Jacob deGrom's game being rained out. We had a situation where there was a surefire number one pitcher who was going to be the runaway favorite on the slate. And there were some question marks around that game, and it eventually got postponed. And there was a lot of questions about whether to go. The Mets owner himself is tweeting, hey, we're going to get this game in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was rough. And if it were a situation like NFL, we'd have a full week to lick our wounds and dive back in. For baseball, we don't get that. In fact, we get almost an identical situation for tonight, where Zack Wheeler is definitively the number one pitcher on this slate. He is going to be the number one guy by a wide margin. Unfortunately, there is rain in the forecast in Wrigley for tonight. I think they're going to play, but as evidenced by last night, I got no idea how the weather will break. So, unfortunately, it's deja vu all over again. We are back in the same place. So let's dive on in, and hopefully things break better this time around. Welcome on into the Solo Shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down Wednesday night's 8-game MLB DFS main slate with locks set for 7:05 for tonight. And the only weather note for today is that game at Wrigley for the Cubs and the Phillies. It looks like it'll be light rain, and it might not start until after the game begins. It is worth monitoring. If they do play, wind is blowing in from center field at 10 miles per hour, which would be a downgrade for hitters there, upgrade for Wheeler. But, I don't know. Maybe it's just like being burned one night before is lingering and make me a little bit nervous, but hey, I think we should be good to go. We will see how things break there. Hopefully updated in a better weather forecast coming up later on today. We'll have our Q&A as always at 4 p.m. That's on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Make sure you swing by there and ask your questions for MLB DFS. At 4:30, Aaron Dolan will swing by, break down last night's NBA game, talk about game number 2 coming up, and I think that John Sheeran of FanDuel Sportsbook might be joining her for today. So make sure you swing by at 4:30 if you have questions for either Aaron or John. That is at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time today to talk to them and ask questions about Game 2 in the NBA. Hey, soccer fans, this season, FanDuel and Captain Morgan are teaming up to give you a one-of-a-kind soccer contest. Introducing Captain Morgan's Soccer Pick'em, a weekly fantasy contest that is entirely free to play. The contest is simple. All you have to do is make quick predictions for Saturday games this soccer season. You will earn points for each correct pick and compete for a chance to win up to $3,000 in prizes every single week. Head over to FanDuel and enter the Captain Morgan Soccer Pick'em today. Must be 21 plus to participate. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply, and don't forget to make your game day more delicious and sub in the captain. Pitching preview for this Wednesday main slate. Zack Wheeler is the highest salaried pitcher on the slate. He checks in at $11,200. What could go wrong? Luis Garcia is $9,700. Sean Manaea is facing Garcia, $9,200. Yusei Kikuchi is $9,000 facing the Yankees. Then we have Hyun-Jin Ryu, Alex Wood, and Patrick Corbin as the other guys at $8,000 or higher. And as you could hear there, we're talking about Garcia and Manaea. Tough matchups there. Tough matchup for Kikuchi. And that means that Wheeler is really the no-brainer number one option for tonight. He is on the road, and that can be a bad thing for pitchers at times. But for Wheeler, it's not a huge hindrance. He still has a 29% strikeout rate when he's on the road this year, which is a high mark for this specific slate. And that's his season-long number on the road. But Wheeler has weirdly been getting better recently. He's been cutting back on his four-seam fastball usage over his past 7 starts, and his strikeout rate is up to 34% in that time. That's a very good number. He has still kept his hard hit rate low at 23%. His fly ball rate still 25%. So if you get a situation where a pitcher is increasing his strikeout rate while making his batted ball numbers even better than the already good marks they were before, that's pretty enticing. It's a really gross combination in a complementary fashion. Gross is very good here. And that's been great. The road starts Wheeler has made in that time have been very good as well. He has faced the Rays, Dodgers, and Mets. He had 14 strikeouts against the Rays, 6 against the Dodgers over 6 shutout innings, and then 8 against the Nets, revenge game, over 7 shutout innings. So he goes super deep into games, gets a huge leash from a pitch count perspective. That's all good. The Cubs, not a bad offense, but definitely one we don't need to avoid. A 90 WRC plus versus righties, but importantly, they have a 27% strikeout rate. That is huge. for an opposing pitcher's upside. So outside of weather, I can't find any reasons not to love Wheeler. I think he's great. So I want to be aggressive with him here, but I also don't want to get burned like I did last night where I had a lot of Jacob deGrom, almost exclusively Jacob deGrom. So it's rough to try to bounce back in a very similar situation once again, but hey, that is the hand we are being dealt. We'll see how things break. Hopefully get an update on the weather, and we are going to manifest good weather in Chicago for today so we can get Zack Wheeler a full go for today. The second pitcher is hard to pick, and that does go to the point of why we are so high on Zack Wheeler, but it's also tough to find alternatives here. There are no obvious contenders for the second slot. Everyone else has a healthy amount of risk for one reason or another, or just a bad ceiling too. The two guys who I like the most, despite their imperfections, are Alex Wood and Chris Paddack in that order. So let's start here with Wood at $8,300. He is at home, which is always good. It's a cooler park in the 50s tonight, so it's a great park for pitching. He's facing the Cardinals, and they're better against lefties than righties, but not a team we need to avoid necessarily. They have a 99 WRC plus versus lefties, so about league average, whereas about 86 versus righties. And I think that's fine. Not a ton of power either for the Cardinals. Wood himself has been up and down all year. Started off really, really impressive with a lot of strikeouts, good batted ball data, good pitch counts. He had a great first month. Then he started to cut back on his slider usage, and the performance went backward, and it wasn't good. But we did see Wood go back to the slider a bit more his most recent time out. He had a 34% usage on that pitch, his most recent start. His swinging strike rate there was 12.2%. So I'm hoping that he sticks with this plan of increasing the slider usage once again. The most relevant sample on Wood is his past 4 starts with less movement on his sinker. He has a 31% strikeout rate in those 4 starts. His skill interactive ERA is 3.31. He has at least 7 strikeouts in 3 of those 4 games. So those are all good numbers. That's why I'm willing to consider Alex Wood for today. But $8,300, you'd think that if I can get a guy with, 7 or so strikeouts, I'd be pretty jazzed, especially in a good park. But the reason I'm not higher is hard contact. Wood is letting up a 54% hard hit rate in that time, and the Cardinals have some individual batters who can bob. So that's why I am so adamant in saying Wheeler is number 1 by a wide margin, and I can't get super jazzed about Wood. I think he's second, for sure, number 2 on the slate for me, but it's not enough for me to be super enthused about him. So to me, it is definitely Wheeler 1, Wood 2, and then Chris Paddack is third. And third is high for Paddack considering that he recently burned us. I used him 2 starts ago against Arizona, and he promptly let up 5 runs across 2 1/3 innings. And I can't even blame it on him being on the road. He was at home. So the floor for Paddack is not very good, but he does have a ceiling. Paddack has had less movement on his four-seam fastball over his past 4 outings, and he has a 30% strikeout rate in that time, and that does include the wretched start against that bad Arizona team. That's because we saw Paddack get a couple of pop games in this sample. He had 9 strikeouts against the Mets and 11 against the Reds. His swinging strike rate was at least 20% in both those games. Then he had the rough start against Arizona. That was rough. But the next time out, he faced Philly, and he lasted 7 innings and got a quality start. So he's not consistent. He's maddening, honestly. Though the one bad start in there came against Arizona because, sure, why not? I am fine with inconsistency if it includes a path to a big game. And Paddack does have that, as he showed in those Mets and the Mets and the Red starts. He also gives you salary flexibility if you want to stack the Blue Jays, which I would love to do for tonight. So there are things to like here. I would note again, Wood and Paddack do not have good floors. Wheeler does. So assuming the weather lets him play. So for cash games, go Zack Wheeler. For tournaments, I think you have wiggle room there to go Wood and Paddack at times as being the next 2 on your list, but the grand majority of your exposure should be to Wheeler just because he is so far and away the top guy in the slate. And importantly, I actually think there are a couple stacks that fit well with him from a salary perspective, and I would expect them to go overlooked for today. The one stack I do not expect to go overlooked is the Blue Jays. They're facing Matt Harvey, so, people will be on this. And I feel bad for Matt Harvey. This is the 3rd time he has faced the Blue Jays in his past 4 starts. The other one was against the Astros. He did really well there. I mean, relatively, he did well enough. So that's interesting. He's had he's had a rough schedule for sure, and he's navigated it okay. In the 2 starts he's had against the Jays, Harvey has gone 10 innings. He's allowed 7 earned runs, with just 6 strikeouts. That's why we are here for today. He let up 2 home runs in the second start against them. So we talked about this last time, but seeing that success the Jays have had against Harvey is key because they're a righty-heavy lineup, and Harvey does better against righties than lefties. It just hasn't mattered with the Blue Jays. They're good enough to overcome that. If we zoom out and don't focus just on that 1 start with the Blue Jays, or the 2 starts with the Blue Jays, Harvey's forcing fastball movement has been down over his past 6 starts. His skill interactive ERA is 5.20. He has a 14% strikeout rate, so he's letting up a lot of balls in play. And the Blue Jays have a 188 ISO against righties, despite how righty heavy they are. So I find no reason not to like them here. That 1 start against the Astros was indoors. That definitely does help things. Also, it wasn't like the best start from a peripheral perspective, not a ton of strikeouts, let up 2 runs across 4 1/3. So it's not going to scare me off of stacking the Jays for tonight. I think they are the no-brainer top option for today, and I will treat them as such. With that said, there's not a ton of value here if you're trying to get to Zack Wheeler, so they might be hard to stack unless you have a second value stack, which we'll talk about too in a second. But Kevin Biggio is a fun exception to that thought process. He is $2,800. He hits lefty, so that's good against Harvey. And Biggio has a 172 ISO versus righties with a 42% fly ball rate. Put that in Baltimore, and very good things can happen. So Biggio himself has a ton of upside. I like him as being a key part of a stack. And also, let's say hypothetically you can't stack the Blue Jays with Wheeler. I think that Biggio is a really solid one-off to get exposure to that team without totally breaking the bank. So the Jays, to me, definitively the top option for today. Now, one way you can get more Blue Jays is by having a value second stack. And I think we can get some of that value in this exact same game by stacking the Orioles only in tournaments because they're facing Hyun-Jin Ryu. And it may be very stupid to stack against Ryu. It may sound very stupid. It possibly is stupid. But I think it's worth the risk exclusively in tournaments. Ryu has been kind of weird his past 4 starts. He has been leaning more on his four-seam fastball, and the velocity on that four-seam fastball is up. But despite the increased velocity, Ryu is just getting knocked around. He has a 5.44 skill interactive ERA in that time with a 12% strikeout rate. He's walking more guys. He's letting up hard contact 46% of the time. And interestingly enough, 2 of those starts came against this Baltimore team, which means that they've seen him very recently. Ryu did go deep in both those games, but he let up 4 earned runs in the second one. He had just 3 strikeouts across 28 batters faced. He also let up 2 homers against the Yankees and the Mariners in this time. So I'm not sure what's up with Ryu. It could be the sticky stuff discussion for sure. So, true for everyone at this point. But it could be something else. But he doesn't seem to be his usual self right now. And plus, the Orioles, pretty good against lefties, a 107 WRC plus for them with a 163 ISO, and they have seen him twice in the past couple weeks. So I can work with that. There are also plenty of low salary guys here, so I think we should be willing to use the Orioles in tournaments as long as you're okay with risk. There is a lot of risk here. I don't want to overlook that. There's a lot of risk, but I do think they are worth it for me for today. One of the big values here is Austin Hayes. He's not like the biggest power guy, but he does have a 154 ISO against lefties. High enough where we can feel okay about him. His strikeout rate is 14%, so a lot of balls in play, and 39% of those balls in play are fly balls. Hayes will likely hit second. That's really enticing for me for just $2,700. So I like Hayes a lot. Ryan Mountcastle is $2,900. He's got power too. Obviously, you'd want to get to Trey Mancini and Cedric Mullins if you can. Mullins actually very good versus lefties too. He's a lefty, but he's very good versus lefties. So I think the Orioles, despite the fact that they are very risky, are a great stack for today and one that I will use in order to increase my exposure to the Blue Jays when using Zack Wheeler as my pitcher. The other route for saving salary comes from the Mariners, and that's probably not going to be a very popular route people go for today because they're facing Domingo Germán, and Germán is generally, I think, regarded as being a good pitcher. I guess Yankees fans might not be in that same boat, but he's not someone we tend to stack against. We got questions about him last week on the Q&A as from a pitching perspective. So I think that I wouldn't guess the Mariners wind up carrying a lot of popularity for today. But Germán hasn't pitched well since June started, and I'm not sure why. There obviously are several theories as to why that could be the case, but there was a change in his approach as well in this time. In the first start in June, Herman started throwing more four-seam fastballs, and that's pretty weird because it's not a good pitch for him. The SWOBA against that is 421. The two off-speed pitches for Herman are both under 300. So very good off-speed pitches, really bad four-seam fastball, which means that using more four-seam fastballs is not a good thing for Domingo Herman. And it has not worked out. He has a 4.94 skill interactive ERA in that time with an 18% strikeout rate. His hard hit rate is up to 40% with a 43% fly ball rate. The peripherals are bad. The results also have not been very good. He has a 7.27 ERA in this time. He's let up 3 runs in 5 of the 6 starts. He let up 7 in one of them. And most of those did come against very good offenses. So keep that in mind for sure. The Mariners are not a very good offense, but they also aren't like actively bad, I wouldn't say. So I'm into it. I don't expect the Mariners, again, to be very popular tonight. Their implied total is 4.15. I don't expect people to be here. But to me, I think they are a great tournament stack alongside the Orioles as a consideration for single entry. So a couple of teams that I think will probably not be super popular due to the matchups they've got, it being, big name pitchers in Herman and Ryu. I like them. I think that they work for today for both the Orioles and the Mariners. As far as the Mariners go, we got some high upside value plays here. Mitch Haniger and Kyle Seager are not value plays at $3,400 and $3,000, but they're great. The one guy I love here is Jake Fraley. He's been torching balls. He's $2,700, has some stolen base upside too. He's tremendous. I adore him. Luis Torrens, if he catches tonight, which he might not because he's caught the past 2 days, he's got some power. He's $2,700. If he's in there, be willing to use him. Dylan Moore, Taylor Trammell, they have upside if they hit high enough in the order. Wouldn't expect that necessarily, but with Jake Fraley, Seager, Haniger, got a really good core here that is easy to get to. So I do think that the Mariners, despite the fact they're not going to grade out well from a bookmaking perspective, are a team that we should be high on for today in terms of stacking if we want to get to Zack Wheeler. Let's move now to things to watch for today. Got 3 different bullpen games today. We got the Marlins and the Dodgers going to the bullpen game, and the Diamondbacks as, I think, 2 potentially. They're facing they're pitching Humberto Castellanos, who did start in AAA, but I don't think he's fully stretched out anymore. Either way, the Marlins and Dodgers, very good bullpens. I like some of their long relievers. Plus, it's in Miami, which is not a great park. So I'm okay being lower on those 2 offenses. Arizona's facing Colorado. For Castellanos, it's a terrible offense, especially on the road. And the roof will be shut today at Chase Field. So it's not the best park factor either. I am fine being lower on all these situations. So although the Marlins, Dodgers, and Diamondbacks are having bullpen games, I'm not super jazzed about stacking against those teams for tonight. If you want another stack to consider, I'll check out the Giants against Johan Oviedo. It is a terrible park factor here. It's you mentioned before with talking about wood, 59 degrees, not a great park in general. That's tough. It is a great matchup for the Giants, and they're a very good offense despite their park, though. Oviedo has a 5.39 skill interactive ERA across his past 4 starts with fewer sliders. His strikeout rate is 13%. The Giants have scored double-digit runs at home 4 times this year, so they have upside despite the really bad park factor, and it's enough to justify checking them out. I think the Giants are number 4 for me tonight in terms of stacking. Finally, I do want to note that the Phillies will not be super high on my list for tonight, assuming that game plays. They're facing Alec Mills, and Mills has always been someone who has gotten a lot of ground balls. Traditionally, that's like his MO, is getting ground balls. Last time out, we saw Mills get a lot of strikeouts as well. The Phillies have been hitting well the past 2 nights, but the weather here is drastically different. Mills should limit some of their upside as well. So I think that's enough where I'm okay being lower on the Phillies for today, just because Mills might be better than perception and the weather not breaking in their favor this time around. Let's finish up with our dinger calls for today. 1 boring one and 1 fun one. The boring one was going to be from the Blue Jays. I feel like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is too boring. So we'll go George Springer. I had talked before about how I was wary of Springer when he came off the injury list. I'm no longer wary. He's been great since he came off. So George Springer to me is my boring home run call for tonight out in Baltimore. The fun one is Jake Fraley. Talked about him before. Stolen base upside. Got some dingers too. A lot of fly balls. Not the best park by any means, but still a good situation for him. So home run calls for today on the solo shot, George Springer and Jake Fraley. Be sure if you're tuning in for the Q&A today, get your home run calls lined up as well, as they're fun to read through. So feel free to swing back once again today at 4 p.m. Eastern, the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Make sure you're subscribed there as well. Also check out the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts, our PGA podcast for this week already posted. That is the John Deere Classic. That's with myself and Brandon Gadula breaking down our favorite PGA DFS plays on FanDuel for this week at TPC Deere Run. The Open is next week. We'll be recording our podcast of that on Monday on the FanDuel YouTube page and on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Other stuff this week here on the numberFire DFS feed. We've got Austin Swaim going to be breaking down the big UFC slate this week with the Conor McGregor fight. Also have NASCAR from Atlanta coming up, both those on Friday. Fantasy Friday, back once again this week here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Make sure you're subscribed. And also, if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. If you have questions for me before 4 p.m., I am on Twitter at JimSannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your DFS lineups for tonight. Let's pray for some better weather in Chicago for today. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.